Okay, well today is the day that I get the most excited about. Today we get to finish our knife, and the glue is all dry now. I left it overnight, 24 hours, a little bit longer than that actually, to glue up because I was busy yesterday. And I've taken just a piece of cardboard, folded it over, and gorilla taped it, and you can use that for a temporary sheath, because remember, we have a wire edge on this knife now, and we're going to be manipulating it around the grinder. So to keep it from cutting us, we're going to make sure that we're protected by this blade guard. Now we can start to shape this handle on the sanding belt. Let's get started. Again, this is a process you want to take your time with. There's no hurry in this. Okay, so as I'm getting this evened up now to the metal, I'm also coming into the front side here and just kind of bringing it in toward the blade. Giving myself a thumb ramp, if you will. And that'll all get dressed up little by little as we go. I'm just going to bring it down to a semi-even point first. And now we're just coming in and we're kind of rolling this handle on the belt. And this is where we're going to start to shape our handle. And we can go to a more aggressive belt. This one's getting worn down, and I like to save worn belts to use for stuff like this. If we put a very aggressive belt on here, it's going to eat off a lot of wood really fast. And if we make a mistake, it might be hard to correct. At this point, mistakes aren't too hard to just stand down into and fix. So just rolling around the belt. Gentle pressure on the slack side right now is what I'm doing, just to get the back of this handle shaped in the way I want it. You're going to end up hand sanding this no matter what you do to get it final before you oil it. So right now, you're just trying to get your basic shape molded in there. Alright, so now I'm kind of starting to do some more fine shaping here, and I'm getting that drop down right by the blade there. You see, it goes right to the edge of the blade. And I'm just taking my time on the edge of the belt here, kind of rolling that knife to get that transition from handle to blade just the way I want it. You notice I haven't changed belts. The more this thing wears out, the less material is taken off, but that's better for me. I'll put a finer belt on here when I get closer to a finished handle. And then I'll go down to hand sanding from there. I'm constantly looking at what I got, seeing what that thickness is right there at the blade, because I want them to be even on both sides. Now I go back to my transition again. So I'm not quite thin enough there yet. Always good to take a break from an area when you're working on it. Come back to it, look at it again, come back to it until you're happy with it. Okay, Now we're going to take off this heavier belt and we're going to go down to what's called a J belt. And it's a lighter grip belt, but it's also a more flexible belt so that we can get around those areas. And I'm going to use one that's been used. I'm not going to use one that's brand new. Don't want to eat a bunch of material off, I just want to do some fine shaping. But this belt will actually run right along real easy, just like this, and follow the contours of that handle really well to kind of finalize my shaping process and give me a finer finish. Okay. We're real close to exactly what I'm looking for now in my handle. And now we're going to go at this thing with some sandpaper before we start working on the blade again. Again, our blade's been protected the whole time, so we're in good shape there. We got some nice clean lines on this handle. Once we final sand it, it's going to fit perfect in our hand. Alright, so we're just going to take a cheap sanding block, and now we're going to go after the blade with that, just to smooth everything, or go after the handle I should say with that, just to get everything smoothed out the way we want it. And this is a medium grip block. We shouldn't have a whole lot of work to do here if we did our job right on the stand-up sander there and reduced down to a lighter belt and took lighter strokes on it during the final shaping process. We shouldn't really have too much to do here to get a nice smooth handle. Alright, so we've got our handle now to the point where it's nice and smooth and it's ready really to be finish oiled. But before we do that, we're going to work on the blade, because we can always put the blade back in this temporary sheath to final oil our handle. It's going to need a couple coats of whatever oil we decide to use. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to finish the blade of this knife. Now, I've got 3 different buffing wheels here. I have a large wheel on this grizzly grinder, and then I have 2 smaller wheels here on just a Harbor Freight grinder. You don't have to have real expensive tools for some of this stuff. You just got to have a variety. So I'm going to use black compound on this one. I'm going to dress this wheel with black compound. Then I'm going to use white compound on this wheel, which is a little less coarse than the black. These are all clay-based, different coarsenesses, and they will remove material because they are abrasive. And then I'm going to use a green on the last wheel. So I have 3 different buffing compounds that I use progressively, one finer than the next, to finish this blade. Keep this blade, this grinder spinning this way. You've got a rotation arrow right here. You want to keep this blade away from you for sure, and keep it underneath the wheel. Don't get on top and don't go too far underneath. Just stay right here underneath the wheel at a slight upward angle on the blade, and that's going to remove that wire edge and remove anything else you've got on the blade. There's a little bit of adhesive or something on the blade right there. This will grind that right off. Again, keep your hands underneath here and away from that cutting surface. Keep a good firm hold with the other hand. Apply a little bit of pressure upward. Buff one side and then buff the other. So you buff your ricasso real good. Now if you've got some areas on this blade that you've got adhesive on here, you can always come up in here and polish that off. Now this part of the process is no different than the rest. It's a slow process, taking your time. to buff that blade down. I'll show you what we're getting here in just a minute. We're starting to get a buff on that blade now. Remember that you're actually removing material with this buffing process. Now I really can't tell you how long you need to spend on this process because it's something that you're going to develop a feel for over time. But you're trying to get any major grinding scratches out of the blade at this point. You're not trying to get it down to a mirror polish necessarily, but you are trying to get the major grind marks out of it and get rid of that wire edge, and you should be able to feel that that blade is fairly sharp, for sure at this point. Okay, we're going to move over to this other grinder, and this thing moves a lot faster with a lot more RPM. So now we've really got to be cognizant of where this blade is all the time and be very careful to keep our hands back away from things. Take breaks. As we go to our final grinding wheel here, and it doesn't mean that you can't go back. So don't think that just because I'm down here doesn't mean I can't go back here. Because I bounce back and forth sometimes. If I don't get everything I want when I finish this wheel, I'll go right back to this one. I very rarely go all the way back to the beginning, but I'll go back to this one quite often. Same thing. We're just trying to stay nice and light on our strokes right now. You're going to get some compound buildup on the blade, especially if you just put fresh compound on. Don't worry about that. As you buff this down, it'll come out. Now you really have to be careful with these thin wheels because they'll catch your blade and yank it faster than the thicker wheels will sometimes. So you got to be cognizant of that as well all the time. Okay, let's clean her up. You want to know how sharp that blade is? That's how sharp it is. Shaving sharp. Okay, so this is our blade in its completed state, and it's got a little bit of compound buildup right on the edge line of the grind there, right in the ricasso, but when you oil this blade down, that will all wipe off. So now we're ready to oil finish our handle, and we're going to just put it back in the sheath for that, this temporary sheath we've got. We'll just stick it back in that for now so that we don't cut ourselves while we're working on the handle. And we'll just stick it in a vise, and then we can rub this handle down really good with some oil. Now you can use lots of different types of oil on this handle. What I'm going to use is just pure linseed oil. The one thing you've got to remember with linseed oil is that linseed oil can spontaneously combust as it's drying because it creates heat. So you got to take the rags that you're going to use for this process and don't store them in a wad somewhere in your barn. Lots of barns have burned down because of that. I usually store mine in a bucket of water after the fact. So we'll get this handle wiped down really good with linseed oil, and we'll probably use at least 2 coats on this and maybe 3. So we'll let 1 coat soak in really well, and then we'll come in and put another coat on it. here in just a few minutes. We want to pull it out of the sheath just a little bit to make sure that we get down in the cracks and crevices of this thing really good. Get those front edges really, really well. Well guys, we've got 2 coats of boiled linseed oil on our handle now, and our knife is complete. I'll try to get some pictures up close of the knife for you and get them on this video at the beginning as well. I hope you enjoyed this quick series on making a material reduction knife from start to finish. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters and the Pathfinder School, and I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, and for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.